The reason that this got started is a couple of years ago, the last election, there was forums going on, and we were submitting questions about motorcyclist issues and rights, and time after time after time, they weren't getting asked, they were being ignored. So we said, to hell with it, we're gonna do our own, and we're gonna ask questions strictly about it. So tonight's forum, the questions will be strictly on motorcyclist issues. This will be held with respect and decorum, not just from the candidate, but from the crowd. We will not be discussing anything off topic for motorcycles, strictly motorcycles and motorcycles only. We'll give each of you 2 minutes to have an opening statement, introduce yourself, and then I will turn it over to Randy, who will ask you questions, and you have 90 seconds to answer them.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for having me. It's actually an extreme pleasure to be here, so thank you for having me. And I do believe in ABATE. It's a wonderful program because it's the brotherhood that educates people about motorcycle rights, and that is the first. An ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. So when you educate people on how to do things properly, you can prevent a lot of issues that are coming there. And one of the things is be seen. I think that's let those who ride decide. And I think you had another statement that says be seen and see us. I see you. I was here a couple days ago. I was listening to you. I talked to many of you, and I hear you. I'm not going to be here tonight to tell you what you want to hear, but I'm here to tell you what I believe is the right thing to tell you. Sometimes these decisions on motorcycle deaths particularly, which is my office would have a big deal to do with, are not easy. They're decisions that are very difficult because they're fraught with emotion, and you never really have anyone happy. It's a very sad occasion. But what I will promise you as your next Kane County State's Attorney is you will have somebody aggressively reviewing facts, and I will always err on the side of the victim. That's my mantra. That's who I'm all about. You need to look at victims and who they are. And I think that sometimes what's happening in our country is we're looking a lot at the defendant's rights, and we kind of ignore some of the victim's rights. Sometimes I think that the system is turning upside down on its head, and that really concerns me. As a matter of fact, that's one of the reasons I'm running for your Kane County State's Attorney, is I don't want to be in a situation where the defendants are ruling the answers. It's still about victims and victims' rights. So I'm very happy to be here. I think you heard a lot about who I was last time, so I'm not going to bore you with those details now. But if anybody has any questions at any time, you can check out there's cards in the back. You can always email me, and I know Janie and Michael emailed me and we spoke. So if anybody has any questions at any time, please do that. And you see that I do get back to you. So,
would you like to see a helmet law for motorcycles? And we'll go with.
I would not, for any age.
Okay.
It's a parent's responsibility for the young ones and the adults. Sometimes you like to get on the motorcycle and you want to ride, and that's what you should be able to do.
Would you like to see a noise ordinance for motorcycles?
I would not.
Not. Okay. Do you believe cities or counties should be able to ban kids from running ATVs and dirt bikes on your own property?
Same answer.
Same answer. Okay. We'll start with you. Do you believe local establishments open to the public, such as bars, restaurants, and parking garages, should be allowed to discriminate because a person rides a motorcycle or wears motorcycle attire?
Of course not.
Can you elaborate on something that you're looking to help the legislation, or the law, actually,
Yes.
law?
So myself, State's Attorney Berlin, the Chiefs Association, and the Sheriff's Association are meeting, and we're drafting proposed changes right now specifically for the Pretrial Fairness Act, which is a portion of the Safety Act. This is the elimination of cash bail. And listen, I love the fact that it's gone because people can't pay their way out of jail. And we've had dangerous offenders who have posted thousands and thousands of dollars, gotten out and committed more crimes. They deserve to be in jail where they belong. But the detainable offenses, the net that they have is based on what New York did, not what New Jersey did, which means we have violent offenses that we cannot detain people on. So for example, our police officers who go out and do their job, when somebody batters them, that is a non-detainable offense unless they commit great bodily harm. I am personally prosecuting a case right now out of Aurora where the officer was punched so hard in the face, he fractured his orbital bone. That guy got detained, but only because it rose to the level of great bodily harm. That is not the way that it should be. There are many other offenses, including class 4 felony offenses such as unlawful restraint, that you cannot even ask for them to be detained because our legislature decided that they don't want to include these offenses.
It's not kidnapping?
No, it's different from kidnapping. It's different elements, basically.
Sorry.
No, it's a very good question, and I can explain the nuances. I have like a 3-hour PowerPoint if you want.
You got 10 seconds.
So there's a lot of stuff with that and other little fixes that nobody really anticipated, and we're actively drafting it to try to get ahead of them with statistics and actual cases.
Mr. Sosnowski, are you familiar with the Safety Act?
Yes, I am.
Okay. Why don't you give us a little synopsis of your opinion of this and what you might want to look to change if you were happen to be elected?
Well, the purpose of the Safety Act, when you look at it, is good in general. That you're trying to make sure that there's no prejudice or there's no bias in prosecution. But the thing that bothers me the most is we are the only state, other than New Jersey and some nuances, that actually has full no cash bail laws. And you know, why are we the practice subjects in the state of Illinois? You know, I would like to see the prosecutor, I'd like to see prosecutors around the state come out against it right from the beginning. And there were a lot of prosecutors around the state of Illinois that did not want fixes, but they wanted to object fully that we don't want the Safety Act here in Illinois. Now again, there's some good parts of it, you know, but under the Pretrial Fairness Act, there's a lot of indiscretions that are happening. And the problem is you have people that are affected, victims. As your next state's attorney, if God wills, I am for victims' rights. That's what I look at. I look at the people like you and I who could be subject to these things. And if you tell somebody who is the victim of a burglary that that person is not as important because that offense is not egregious enough, but it's their business that's being broken into and they see the person out there the next day, that is not fair. It's just not fair. So, and then the whole thing about the, you know, when you look at Springfield, they do great things like this. They call it the Safety Act. They think we're a bunch of morons, okay? It's nothing to do with safety. It's an acronym. Just like when you talk about the idea of the Inflation Reduction Act. It doesn't reduce inflation. They love to name these things so that they will push it down our throats.
Yeah.
So as your next Kane County State's Attorney, I will try to get rid of that Safety Act. And I don't believe it should be around.
There you go. You've been to a meeting and you've obviously come here this evening for this, so we've had a little discussion on some of the issues with the laws. And is there anything you think that you might want to have a legislator introduced to, you know, work on such things as these difficult things about homicide and whether the charges you can find against some drivers and illegal drivers, non-licensed drivers, you know, is there anything in that mix that you've heard or perhaps that you might have an idea with? You know,
Well, number one, I would obviously defer to you and your organization. You know the most about what you're seeing. But what I would say is, why don't we have laws to tell the prosecutors to get answers to these questions much more quickly and expediently without obviously affecting justice, instead of people waiting for so many months and years and not knowing what's going on. Maybe there should be some laws on making prosecutors more transparent to tell us what's going on, instead of saying we need a legislative fix, but to say what's the problem with the case itself, and to look people in the eye. You know, I'm a former prosecutor. I actually prosecuted reckless homicide cases, and they were in my courtroom as well. I've been in Joe Davis County, Ogle County, McHenry County, Kane County, and I've prosecuted in my courtroom. At one time we had several reckless homicide cases. And they're not easy. They're not easy. They're difficult cases to prosecute. And it takes a lot of energy and a lot of gumption to bring those cases forward. Sometimes you don't have all the facts right on all fours, but you've got to be aggressive for victims and victims' families.
Very good. State's Attorney Monster, you've obviously had and seen from us and issues that have occurred. Can you elaborate a little bit on the language or perhaps the fixes that you see necessary to help prosecute some of these cases?
Yes, so the biggest problem that we have is in our law around reckless homicide when you don't have a person who is acting recklessly by the definition of the law. Because the problem is that the law requires so many different actions to happen to rise to the level of reckless. What we need is a law that we have seen in other states that deals more with negligence. I have had to come to these meetings and I have had the unfortunate duty to talk to widows and widows of people who have lost their life, and I have to tell them that because there is no drugs or alcohol in the person's system, because there is no proof that there was any type of distracted driving, and because the only thing that they did is that they turned the left-hand turn in front of somebody, I can't charge it because that's not reckless. Negligent? Absolutely, but not reckless. And that's the law that we drafted that we're hoping to put through, and we've been talking to a lot of our legislators because I need this to go without politics. I know that there are plenty of Republican senators and reps who want to do this, but I'm trying to get the Democrats to stand behind this too because I want it to go in fully. That's what we need to do to fix this particular issue that we have in here so that we can actually charge a person for the death that's caused of a motorcycle rider. We have drafted that, we've run it through DuPage County. DuPage County is on board with this. This is what I'm excited about doing as the next portion of it.
On that subject, I remember a specific case where the reckless homicide letter of the law was met, but I believe you specifically said that due to previous case law in the state of Illinois, it did not apply. That the letter of the law in Illinois applied, but previous case law overrode that. Am I remembering correctly?
Yes-ish.
Well, that's not really what you just said.
No, so the problem is the way that the statute reads has been interpreted by case law. And the case law itself adds to what we have to have in terms of a prosecution, and that's the problem. The two particular cases that I've come to talk to your groups about, both of them involved a traffic violation that the person who caused the death was charged with, and that's all we could charge. The problem is to be reckless, there are so many things. Included in the reckless homicide statute, it actually puts in the language that if somebody is going over a hill, and I hate to say it this way, Dukes of Hazzard style, but if someone is so going over a hill that they're launching themselves, that's considered reckless. But when somebody turns in front of a motorcycle driver, that's a traffic offense. But it's still negligent. And if we have a law that makes it so that the mental state of the person is negligent, then we can charge because we're not held to this standard. And so that's the issue that we have, is that our case law has made it even more difficult to charge these offenses because of the reckless mental state versus negligence.
Having prosecuted reckless homicides, is there something else you'd like to see as part of that?
And with all due respect to the Madam Prosecutor, I disagree. Okay? I disagree fully. There are four mental states. We have intent, knowledge, negligence, and recklessness. You know, for reckless homicide, which we've had on the books for years, they encompass cases where there is for example, someone going on the road driving and going into another lane, veering into another lane. You can argue, again, this takes aggressive prosecution. You could argue that that's conscious disregard of a substantial risk, which is negligence. Which is reckless. You don't need a negligence standard. You know, again, more laws. When I first started prosecution, the law book was about 2 inches thick. When we go in there right now, that's criminal laws. Now it's maybe about 24 inches thick. We're not any safer.
So the laws negligence factor in the law be helpful?
I don't think so. I think again, you're going to basically then criminalize true accidents, true things that are not even, you're a negligent act, like somebody did something completely without not a substantial disregard for something going on, but truly something that's an accident.
Sure.
There's a difference between negligence and criminal negligence. It's a civil, but it's very, very similar.
Is there a definition of negligence you'd be looking for that would be helpful in there?
Yes, so we've researched what other states have done and we have that definition. And so the problem is when you commit a negligent act and it results in a death or great bodily harm, it still needs to be dealt with. Our reckless standard is much higher than what negligence is. And because of the recklessness, it is a conscious disregard. going into another lane has been found in case law not to be reckless in it and of itself. And that's the problem. We have too many of these cases we can't charge because they're negligent, not reckless by Illinois law.
I'd like to know that case, if we can have that, because I'm not aware of something that says if you veer into another lane and you substantially ignore traffic laws and you kill somebody, that that's not reckless. I don't know the case law. And maybe I'm ignorant, but I don't know the case law.
Where's your parallelism?
Yeah.
Okay.
Could you explain the difference between the legal definitions of reckless and negligent, if you haven't already?
So essentially, reckless disregard is where you have a conscious disregard for the safety of others. And so in this situation, you're making the decision to disregard something that you need to do. Negligence is different. It basically means you're not following a portion of the law. So when somebody turns left, we issue a ticket for failure to yield. That's a negligence standard. It's easier to charge people in the cases if we have a negligence standard versus a reckless. Because reckless, we're basically waiting for somebody to say, yeah, I chose to be unsafe and that's what happened. And so for me as a prosecutor, to be an aggressive prosecutor, I want to have the best type of a charge to get every type of a situation.
Yeah, both of you, so.
Yeah, well, thank you for the question. Again, reckless, you can define this. I don't want to make this a law school examination here, but it is a conscious disregard for substantial risk. Now, conscious disregard is not intent. You don't have to show intent. You don't even have to show that they're conscious objective or they're consciously aware. All you have to do is say there's a conscious disregard. It's a lot different of a standard. And in reckless behavior, like homicide, that's what you have. When you have somebody doing something, that's consciously disregarding a traffic violation, a traffic law, you don't need negligence standard. So that's what I would say on that. Negligent is a true accident sometimes. Criminal negligent rises to a little bit of a different level. But you look at negligent cases, you have that on, when you sue somebody, you sue them for negligent behavior. So even if a homicide, reckless homicide is not criminally charged, you can go to civil court and have a negligent standard as well.
I see.
Yes.
Yeah, I have a question with this particular case that they're talking about, because I think it happened kind of where I live. And I think one of the things I question is, was there no precedence set with this type of case? You are saying that no case like this that maybe replicated the same situation has ever been prosecuted in the state of Illinois. Is that what the determination is?
So I want to try to make sure that I'm answering this. We have case law that deals with reckless homicides. And in those reckless homicides, it sets it shows different facts that meet to what rises to the level of recklessness, so the definition that we said. We have had cases throughout the entire state of Illinois that have been charged, that have either been found guilty and then they're appealed, or not guilty and you don't get an appeal for that at all. The case law says that when it's a mere traffic violation, that's not enough to be reckless. Now, I may believe it, and in the most recent case that we had, this was an individual who was driving without a valid license because he had never gotten a valid license here. This is an individual who was driving up a hill, and because he had to hit the brakes at the last minute, chose to turn left thinking he had a way to go. And he was driving in a car that he shouldn't have because he has no valid license.
Or insurance.
Or insurance. To me as a person, all
It's a
of
different
that
case.
together should rise to the level because he shouldn't have been on the road. That's not what Illinois law says. Now, if we did the negligence standard, in the way that we drafted this legislation, we could charge. And that's what I'm trying to do because I want to make it so that we can hold these individuals accountable for the choices that they made, because it doesn't rise to the level of a conscious disregard for the safety of others.
Do you think that any case like that we were talking about just a second ago, do you think that you've seen in your 35 years of prosecution, have you seen a case where it replicates some of the same ingredients, and is there precedence for it, and have you seen prosecutions occur for it?
Now, I'm not going to say that those cases have been prosecuted and won, but you prosecute those cases. I mean, you can. There's certainly cases I've had in my history similar to that. The reality of the situation is conscious disregard sounds like a big gobbledygook to people, but really it's a fact-based question. And the jury should be able to decide, is this something that was a conscious disregard? What I would ask any prosecutors, have you brought it to the grand jury? Have you talked to a grand jury and brought this case to say, hey, you make a decision. Is there a reckless homicide here? Instead of making some decisions in your office saying it's too difficult or there's this or these reasons for that, you've got to get out on the limb. And sometimes you get slapped around as a prosecutor. I've been there. But you have to be willing to go out there and fight for your rights of your citizens in your county.
Okay.
As a state's attorney over the last 4 years, I've shown that I'm going to put prosecution and people above anything that's political. I have not only prosecuted cases that have supported our community, that have supported law enforcement, but I've also been aggressive in terms of supporting the rights of motorcyclists and their families. I have come to very difficult meetings where I knew people were going to be upset because it's my job to do that. It's my job to be responsive to everyone. I've met with victims, but I've also been very aggressive about legislation because the laws that are created affect all of us. And I have a strong voice as a prosecutor in Springfield, and I do it regardless of who is supporting that. I've written legislation, given it to legislators who have put forth great work. I will continue to do that when I'm reelected. I will continue to come to the meetings. I will continue to be the best supporter of everyone in our community, because for me, it's about what's right and what's just. And it's not for any other reason but the fact that I know that I can make the best difference here, and I have made the biggest difference as your Kane County State's Attorney. And I would seek the support again of an organization that I have seen great work on. We've done our own little program that we put on Facebook to get people to be aware of motorcycles, and I will continue to do that when reelected as your state's attorney. So thank you.
Yeah, first of all, thank you very much for having me tonight. And my opponent here, I think it's the first time we've appeared together, and so I think that's a great opportunity to hear two different opinions, or maybe some of the same. So thank you for allowing us to be present tonight to talk to you. This is part of what democracy is all about. I guess I'm going to leave with this question to you, and it kind of borrows from my friend Ronald Reagan. He said, are you better off today than you were, before the last guy started? So I'd ask you this question. Are you happy with the current prosecution of incidences related to ABATE today? And if you're not, I think there's some concerns. And if you're not, you may have lost trust and faith in the prosecution of those cases. And what I want to do is restore that trust and faith. It's not only about legislation. I'm not a legislator. I will support legislation that's good and that's honest and that will do things that we need to do to move cases forward and prosecute criminals. But I'm not a legislator. I'm a prosecutor. And I will bring cases forward to prosecute to the full extent of the law in the best way that I can, understanding that it's not easy. I've done it, I've been there, I've rolled my sleeves up, I've cried with victims, I've presented cases, and it's not easy. Reckless homicide cases, to believe it or not, are some of the most difficult cases to try. It sounds so easy. The guy went in that lane and that's it. It's a lot more difficult than that. So it takes someone with that gumption. Now, I'm looking for your support in November, like Rob, in September when you first started voting. I'm also looking for your endorsement. I know you endorsed my opponent last time, and I'm asking for your endorsement this time. It's difficult to ask. It's difficult to say, hey, change now, but I'm asking you to do that. And I'm asking based on my experience, my knowledge, and your ability to talk to me. I've talked to several ABATE people already and tried to explain stuff to them. And so I'm asking for that as well. So thank you again very much.
Very good. And I thank all four of you for coming out tonight. Appreciate your answers. I think it's been very educational.